Fellow entrepreneurs, welcome. We're on episode 3 of Osmosis. I can't believe how quickly it's going, right? So we had, Yanez, if you guys remember episode 1, we had Dr. Richard Maponya, arguably the doyen of black business in South Africa, on episode 2. And I'm really excited about episode 3, and I'm going to tell you why. There are some people who, in the conversation about entrepreneurship, can tell you about their journey. And you learn a lot from listening to them. You get a bit of inspiration, a bit of information. But there are very few people whose understanding about how to build business is so technical that it feels like you're sitting in a class. So my next guest, a dear friend, is one of those people. Every meeting I have with him, I've got to tell you. I'll ask him a question. He says, sit down, let me draw it for you. He'll pull out a piece of paper or a notepad. He takes a black pen. The pen's always black. So if you're wondering, I think he's a B candidate, but that's a different story. He'll take out a black pen and he'll start drawing the thing he wants you to see. And in his drawing of what he's explaining, you're learning and you're being inspired. So friends, help me welcome Karl Westvig. Karl, welcome.
Thank you, Vusi.
How are you feeling?
I'm inspired. I'm inspired by you and what you do and the fact that you're building entrepreneurs.
But you're kind of doing the same thing too, right?
We work on it. In many fronts. So, certainly in our business, we fund entrepreneurs. We fund business owners.
Right. So before we get into it, I want to go right back. And I'm talking right back, because typically as entrepreneurs, we see what people become. And it's easy to see the finished product. Tell me a bit about the parts that put you together. So where'd you go to school? How were you raised? What religion are you? Tell me about the pitfalls that you've been through in life.
Okay, so let me go back. Probably my formative years, sort of 12, 13 years old, my parents got divorced.
Right.
We'd moved around many times as a family early in my career, early in my school career, and as a result I went to boarding school for high school. And you become very independent. You tend to look after yourself in that process and not depend on too many other people.
I see. And
I suppose that created that sort of underlying platform of making sure you do it yourself, deliver for yourself. I finished school at Wynberg Boys High School, had a good matric, and got an actuarial science bursary from Norwich Life in those days.
You were a smart boy.
I thought I was smart, and then I arrived in the actuarial science class, and I realized I wasn't as smart as I thought I was.
Right.
And I spent 2 years in actuarial science, and actually realized, having worked as an actuarial science student in my VACs, that I didn't want to be in insurance.
Right.
It's a big industry. It's very structured, formalized, etc. And I think I thought I had a bit more personality than that.
Right.
So after 2 years, I changed. I still did a stats honors degree, so I've got a good understanding of data, and fell by accident into credit risk with Foschini in 1994.
Wow.
And the amazing thing was, I joined the industry at the time that they were centralizing credit. So credit at that stage was on ledger cards in the stores.
Right.
So if you walked into the local Piketberg Foschini, the manager knew you, then he knew where you worked, he knew all your circumstances, and he'd give you 200 Rand credits and he'd write it down on a card.
I've heard about this. So this actually used to happen.
It used to happen.
The manager actually ran a balance sheet.
Exactly.
Right.
In store. Right. And so the challenge was that there was no central database. They didn't have computers to centralize it.
Right.
So you never knew whether there was bad debt or not bad debt. And I joined at the time that they created the first centralized debtors platform.
Yes.
Put a terminal into the store, and then every night would poll the data up to a central server. The next step was then to start doing centralized credit granting. So we then had to have application forms filled in. It was faxed into a central call center. We had a bank of 40 fax machines with paper spewing out from 1,000 stores. And we had people on roller skates, literally on roller skates, collecting and running down around to data capturers who would capture the application. And it was last in, first out. So they kept putting the paper on top of it. So if a store phoned to say, where's my application, they'd have to go through all the in trays, and they always process the top one first. So some guy got a 10-minute turnaround, other guys got a 10-day turnaround.
Jeez.
Yeah, so it was inefficient, but it was centralized. And for the first time, we could start collecting data and start building risk models around credit granting. So it was right at the beginning of the industry. We then put in a fax server, so it was then done on first in, first out, not last in, first out. We could track applications. We could have automated links to credit bureaus to do automated checking. And then we put the first scorecards in South Africa into credit lending.
How long did all of this take?
2 years.
So I just want to make sure I understand it. There's some person watching today who can't get a granted credit at Foschini. You guys, that's the problem. You guys did that to them. You're the reason they're not. You're the reason they're not going to a credit bureau and saying your score's too low for you to afford this T-shirt, so you can't buy from us in credit.
There are ways of getting out of that. Pay your bills for one, but there are ways of dealing with this.
How did you arc from your days in corporate to your days at Arceus?
Okay, so year one at Foschini was incredible. I traveled extensively.
Yeah.
I was sent to San Francisco. I was sent to New Orleans. Looking at credit models, meeting credit scoring businesses First Data, meeting Fair Isaac, so all the big international businesses. So as a 24-year-old, I had an incredible learning curve. The second year was an implementation year. So we were putting the models in, upgrading systems, learning about fraud, learning about syndicated fraud. And by year 3, I started bumping my head on corporate. So I was asking for tools, and I was being told, we're not supporting another tool, or go through the right procedures, or we don't have funding for it, or we don't. So by year 3, I started getting frustrated.
Right.
And I guess that's why I became an entrepreneur, because I got to a point where I felt I couldn't sit in a structure asking for stuff that was so clear to me and no one else understood.
Right.
So I left there and joined a startup in those days called Direct Access, which is an outbound lender.
I know this. These are, my mom used to get those
Exactly.
It's like posters or postcards that arrive, right?
For personal loans.
You have been granted X amount.
Exactly.
Typically written in green.
That's right.
Right.
Green and a little bit of red. So I joined the team. There were 3 of us, along with a founder who brought the concept from the UK. And we started with an empty floor. We had to find desks, we had to hire the people, train them, we had to write the systems, build scorecards. There were a whole lot of firsts. We were the first to do what they call batch scoring. So we could send a database to the credit bureau, get the scores on each of those customers, pre-qualify them, then send them offers to say it's available. Now, bearing in mind at that stage, we were giving half an hour, 15-minute turnaround and voice recorded contracts. The bank's personal loans were taking 3 to 4 weeks to turn around an approval on a personal loan. So it just turned the whole personal industry on its head.
You were giving, say that again, half an hour? Without compromising on quality of book?
And it was data driven. So what people in South Africa don't understand is the level of data available on a bureau is extensive. So you can see every inquiry for credit that you've made.
That's right. Yeah.
We can see every line of credit you have.
Right,
Within that line of credit, we can see every month whether you paid or missed your installment,
That's right,
your current balance, the facility available. So it's extensive. Off the back of that, we can create scorecards, which, based on behavior, can approve for credit.
It's not the point of our interview, but I'm keen to just do this quick segue. How do you, if you would, having a conversation with an entrepreneur growing his business, what would you tell him about the importance of making sure that you meet your commitments on time?
It's fundamental. I mean, it's fundamental. So for instance, the challenge if you have no credit is that they can't assess you for credit.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so what the retailers have been good at in South Africa is providing that first leg in. So if you go and open a store card with a Foschini or Truworths, etc., and build a credit history with them, that'll give you your personal brand, your personal credit history a boost.
Yes.
When you then start applying to the banks for larger ticket items, etc., the score that gets created from that data is a big leg up to getting credit.
Sure.
When we lend to businesses, we do tend to look at the personal profile as well. We generally underwrite the business, but the personal profile does give an indication of how responsible you are.
I see what you mean. So you're now squarely in RCS. Like,
So we haven't got there yet.
yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay. So direct access. So 2.5 years later, we'd built a 250 million rand book, which was making R1 million a month profit. It was a good business, but we weren't.
Say that again, slower.
We'd built a 250 million rand book.
Yeah.
In 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Making about R1 million a month profit.
Yeah.
So it was a good business.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we weren't shareholders. And we built everything ourselves. So we literally, without supervision, brought everything in, created this business, and we weren't shareholders. We were management, we had some incentives. And I remember sitting at lunch with old colleagues saying, why do we do this ourselves? Why are we doing it for other people? And the three of us then left Direct Access, went back to my old employer, Foschini, and said, you have a strong brand, you have 1 million plus customers in those days, and you have 1,000 stores, and you have funding, you have a balance sheet. Why don't you back us to build a business for yourselves? So they took a 70% share in those days. We had a BE partner alongside us, Mineworks Investment Corporation,
Of course, yeah.
MIC, Mick. And we then launched RCS with Foschini.
Why did you need a BE partner?
At that stage, it wasn't a requirement, but what was, and it's a good lesson for everybody, is if we walked to Foschini just as 3 individuals, they wouldn't give you equity. Corporates don't like giving equity. Corporates want 100% control.
Yes, of course.
But if we had a third party involved and a bit of capital behind us,
Yes.
then we're not beholden to the corporates, in which case the corporate's prepared to share equity.
Right.
Yeah, so if we're going as a package with data, experience and a bit of funding, then we can negotiate equity.
Right.
On our own, we wouldn't have been able to.
Right.
Yeah, so that was our leg in. And having learned what we had, so I had the credit risk experience from the Foschini world and understanding their portfolio. I had a track record now from Direct Access where we'd built a similar business without brand endorsement. So we were buying external lists and lending to them. And now we're walking into a Foschini environment where we know the data, we know the customers, strong brand, and it was an unbelievable business model.
Go back. You say a lot of things really quickly. What do you mean buying external lists? What's that mean?
So there are, POPI is going to be an issue at some point for people giving you permission to use your data.
Right.
But there are many data sources that have lists of South African population.
Right.
You can acquire that list. And you can then take that list and go to a credit bureau and say, credit score them for me, tell them who are good payers.
Right.
I can then send Vusi an offer, a green postcard, to say you qualify for 10,000 Rand.
Okay.
Now, when we arrived at Foschini, and that became the beginning of RCS, we had access to 1 million Foschini clients. We knew how they paid the Foschini accounts. We knew how they paid the external accounts. And we made an offer to say, as a Foschini customer, we're going to give you a preferential rate and a preferential offer. Our take-up rates were phenomenal. It was a valuable offering.
I mean, that business was so ubiquitous. It got to a point where you saw the little sticker outside every store, right?
So that was the second part of RCS. So the first part was a direct loan,
right,
where we'd send offers directly to people. And then within Foschini, they'd created a card business for non-Foschini retailers.
right,
And that was RCS Cards. So they would go in the early days to Muller's optometrists,
yes,
and you could walk in and get an OptiCard, which was an optical credit card, and that was underwritten by RCS. So they built this platform. We then rolled the Foschini business into RCS, and that became the RCS card. And they're now the largest provider of third-party credit to retailers in South Africa.
Oh, wow.